Today we're going to be building a mini fridge stand. Like and subscribe for more content. Alright, so step one is we're going to be building our frame. I'm using 2x4s for this frame, just like I said I would. Cutting things down. They wanted basically a countertop height, which would put things at about 36 inches in height with finish. And the pieces on top, I think, were about an inch thick, and so we're looking for about 35 inches on these legs in the front and less on the back because we had a 9-inch surround or paneling, or I'm not really sure what you would call that, but it was in the way, and so the back portions had to be shorter, and you'll see that once things get assembled. So here we're putting about 1,000 pocket hole screws into the framework just to hold everything together, keep things nice and neat. They are very strong. I don't need any crazy joinery or anything like that. Everything's going to be covered up by that barnwood that you see in the background, so I'm not really concerned about it. I'm going to be using some Bessie clamps to hold things together. If you've worked with Craig jig pocket holes, you maybe notice that they like to pull away from you. Bessie doesn't do that. She doesn't care. She's going to make things stay together whether they want to or not, and so I use my Bessie clamp. It does a great job of keeping things lined up the way that I want it. I don't put this bottom piece all the way down at the bottom, just in case I have to remove any material when I get to the location. My fear was that that cutout piece in the back would be maybe just a little bit too short, and I'd have to cut some off. And if I had to do that, I didn't want to lose part of that framework. I also realized that my front was going to be too narrow to accommodate the trash can, and so I had to thin them out a little bit. So here I'm putting the two pieces of framework together. Again, using my clamps just to make things a little bit easier when you're working by yourself. You got to get creative about how you hold things together. That is a huge problem most of the time when you're doing things on your own. And again, just using some pocket holes. I'm using the XL style of pocket hole. I don't think it was necessary, but it's what I had on hand, so it's what I used. And this is just a 2x4 cut in half that I'm using for this front piece. It's going to act as a support and then also as the framework for the shelf that goes down below. And just measuring everything out, making sure things are good the way that they need to be. Trying to do most of the pocket holes and stuff on the inside in places where they won't be seen, so they won't have to be covered up. And that's kind of what it looks like as a finished framework. Next, we move on to making the skin for this project. So the barnwood that we have, some of it's good, some of it's bad, some of it's terrible. And so we are trying to salvage the good and get rid of the terrible and the bad. We don't want that either. So I cut a bunch of pieces down. I kind of lay them out onto the actual framework, and they just cup. They cupped so bad. They look pretty good in the picture here, but maybe by the next day they've either cupped or maybe I just didn't notice it the day before, but they did not look great. And so I'm going to go ahead and sand the framework, try to get rid of any markings or anything that might be seen. And then I'm going to add a little bit of weathered stain to it, just in case you can see any of the 2x4s in between any of the barnwood pieces. I don't want it to look like, hey, they used a bunch of brand new pine 2x4s. And so I thought this was a good idea. And at first I was like, it's way too blue. But once it dries and then you see the pieces come up next to it, it looks basically the same. So I feel good about that. But here's what I mean. When I put those pieces on, they kind of cupped. They looked bad. And so I found some flatter wood that was also barnwood. And I took my flattest pieces that I could find, and I just basically brad nailed them in. Same thing for these flatter pieces, and I'm going to leave the backside empty because when I get to the location, I'm going to have to actually cut that custom to fit in the notch out. I'm not 100% on how much space I'm going to have, but I'm going to bring a circular saw with me and some extra tools as well, just to make sure that I can do that on location. Now just tacking in the front pieces, and I'm going to have to cut these custom to accommodate for the little shelf opening that's right there. And once I get them exactly the way I want them, then we'll tack them in. So at this point, it's pretty well done. We got to install a shelf, which we're building a top right now at this moment. And it's sanding time. We are going to sand like the Dickens. I wish I could sand this fast. That'd be amazing. So clean everything up, add pre-stain conditioner so that it doesn't blotch up. This is black walnut stain that I've used before, and it doesn't look great until you add the shellac, and then it kind of shines. I like it after that. Before that, it kind of looks like somebody tried to set it on fire. But you got to trust the process. I've done this a couple times. I feel like it turns out good every time. But it definitely needs the gloss in order to make it pop. So a couple coats of shellac. And the wood is thirsty, so that first coat just basically gets soaked in. You give it a couple minutes, add the second coat pretty much right away. Then you sand, add another coat, wait a while, sand, add another coat, and usually by coat 5, it's pretty well good and done. Here's the shelf from down below. I do have to mark and cut out these specific notches here based on how I decided to mount my shelf piece. It was an interesting challenge. I was pretty impressed with myself because it turns out pretty flawless. And usually things don't turn out flawless for me. It's like 5th or 6th try. But this actually was basically try number 1. Okay, so here's the dry fit of the shelves. Everything looks good. I like the way those corners meet. Pretty impressed with myself. You should be impressed with yourself. I think that's a good deal. Make you feel good. But yeah, everything's looking good there. Needs to be sanded and sealed, and then we'll put our top on and we should be done. All right, so it's time to finish that shelf. For this one, I just sanded it and I'm going to use some shellac. It's going to be different than the top, and I kind of wanted that contrast. I wanted something to look a little bit different than what the top portion was. It also matches the same kind of thing that I did. You'll see it in the room. It's from my last project. It's the corner cabinet. And so it matches the shelves in the corner cabinet. Now this part was a challenge. It was like a problem with order of operations. I couldn't have both shelf brackets in and get this installed at the same time. It wasn't going to work. It was like a game of Tetris. You had to move it back and forth in just the right order in order to install it. But after like 10 minutes, I finally figured it out. So I felt pretty good when it happened. And I had a little helper help me with the nail gun. So here it's in place, and you can see my corner cabinet in the background here. This is the second project I'm doing at this location. And we're getting things cleaned up as we work because it's nice to have a clean environment. Nobody wants to come back to a bunch of sawdust all over the place. And so I'm just mounting this portion to the underneath. I had some camera work help from my son. It's a little shaky. I forgot the tripod. And there's the finished product. So there it is with the fridge and the garbage can underneath. Excellent project. Thankful for the work. I appreciate it.